So lesson 4 is on page 293. Let's go over a key piece of information. Oops. 293. So at the very top, it says complete the following using distributive property or FOIL. So the first example is a plus b squared. So this is how we ended last class, where I was emphasizing that you have to rewrite it out. So in this one, when I rewrite it out, we have a plus b times a plus b. There'd be numbers in there to help make this a little bit easier normally, but they're trying to show you something very clearly here. So on this first one, I'm going to get a squared. So that's my first terms. We're using FOIL. So my outer terms are a times b. So I get plus ab. My inner terms are b times a, but let's write it in alphabetical order. And then last, I get b times b, so I get plus b squared. I can combine those inside terms to be 2ab plus b squared. So if you wanted, you could say that this is a rule. Whenever you have a plus b, it's really important that that's a plus sign, squared, your answer is going to be in this form. This would be a super lame investigation. We could have done an investigation on this. Slightly different is if there's a subtraction sign. So if we have a subtraction sign here, we write it out with a minus b times a minus b. My first term, a times a, stays the same, so I still get a squared, but now it's a times negative b, so I get minus ab. My inside terms gives me a minus ab. My last term is a negative b times a negative b, which gives us a positive b squared. So I can combine those ab's together to give me minus 2ab plus b squared. So when I look at these first two, the difference is that plus sign versus a minus sign, correct? Only difference? The only difference then once it's expanded out is that's a plus sign and that's a minus sign. It's very different though when we come to this last example. I can't rewrite this one with an exponent because I have two different things being multiplied together because I have a minus b times a plus b. So yes, there's the same a's and b's, but that sign has changed and that makes a really big difference. So a times a still gives us a squared. A times b gives me a positive ab. My inside terms gives me a minus ab. And then my last terms gives me a negative b squared. These inside two, my ab's, I have a positive one and a negative one, they cancel out. So in this one, my final answer ends up just being that. So quite a big difference really when I go to this last example here. Our answer changes quite a bit, but it's a very subtle change in the question. Does that make sense? Something like this, I strongly recommend that you're not just memorizing these rules. I would always expand it out and actually do the multiplication because I feel like it's just asking you to make a simple mistake, but we really just wanted to highlight that. Okay, so their like note here with their little policeman is summarizing that information. This becomes much more important in our next unit. So in our first unit, we're multiplying. In our second unit, we're going to go backwards. And so when we're going backwards from the expanded form to our two binomials multiplying together, this subtle difference becomes even more exaggerated. Okay, let's go through a couple of these examples. Let's do, just so you guys can do spacing a little bit better, let's do B, D, and E. So you guys can watch your spaces on these. So when we do B, I would always rewrite it. So 3x minus 1 times 3x minus 1. Same thing written out twice. So now, so notice this says expand. You're going to see a couple different ways to ask you to do the question. Expand, this is expanding it out. So now 3x times 3x, we're still using FOIL. We're always going to be using FOIL, so much FOIL. 3x times 3x gives me 9x squared. That was our first term. Now our outer terms, so 3x and a minus 1 gives me minus 3x. And inner terms also gives me a minus 3x. Minus 1 times minus 1 gives me plus 1. Here, let me just finish this, Matt. I can combine those terms to give me minus 6x. Okay, go ahead, Matt.
Are you sure 3x times 3x is 9x squared? Isn't squared mean? Wouldn't that mean it would be 9x times 9x?
It's just 3. Okay, so split it. 3 times 3 is 9. Do you agree? And x times x gives us x squared. So it's really 3x times 3x, which I could break into those pieces, which gives us the 9x squared. I feel like I'm missing what you're asking. Or does that answer it? Okay. How was that one? Does that one make sense? Are we okay with that question? Okay, let's try D. So D is the one, we have the two different signs, so things should cancel out here when we go through D. Is it okay that the X is the second term? Totally. Is it how we normally see it? No, so it just makes us slightly uncomfortable. That's okay to be slightly uncomfortable. 4 times 4 gives us 16. That's our first term. Outer terms, 4 times 7x gives me a plus 28x. Our inner terms gives us a minus 28x. Our last term gives us a negative 49x squared. These two guys cancel out. 28 x's positive and 28 negative x's cancel out. So I get 16 plus 49x squared. 16 is a perfect square, correct? Sorry, that's minus 49. So before I said up in our first example here, it's going to be a squared. Well, I could have written that as 4 squared. It's better to actually write it as 16, but 16 is a perfect square. So it's still following that rule, just slightly different look. I want you to try E on your own. Okay, so for E, I'm going to get 25a squared minus 15ab plus 15ab minus 9b squared. Those two cancel out, so I get 25a squared minus 9b squared. Raise your hand if you got that one right. Good. Awesome. Okay, turn the page. That was basically review from yesterday, correct? Yes. Next page is where life gets trickier. So these questions are starting to be like our 4, 5, 6 questions. They'll get steadily more difficult as we go down the page. This first one, this is all separated by multiplication. I could argue, if we were like doing a debate math class, that a similar example of this could be like 5 times 2 times 3. 3 different things being multiplied together. 1, 2, 3. If we were to do this example, 5 times 2 times 3, I can just like work my way through it, correct? So if I wanted, I could go 2 times 3 is 6. 5 times 6 is 30. Do you guys agree? Cool. Could I have done, though, 5 times 2 is 10, then 10 times 3 is 30? Yes, good. The reason why I say this is when we look over on this example, you can multiply the 5 into the first term and then multiply it out, your like binomials out, or you could do your binomials together and then multiply your 5 in. You only do it once, though. That's what's really important. For whatever reason, I personally almost always do this piece first. Does it matter? No. Will I change on occasion because, I don't know, I'm flighty and I change things? Totally. It's your personal preference, but make sure that you're only doing the multiplication piece once. So let's do it. Let's pretend there was those extra brackets there. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite that 5. And then I'm going to put my brackets out, and we're going to do FOIL inside those brackets. So I get 2x times x gives me my 2x squared. 2 times minus 6 gives me negative 12x. 3 times x gives me minus 3x, and I get plus 18. I'm going to clean that up first because I think it's easier if it's all cleaned up. So I get 2x squared minus 15x plus 18. Now I'm going to multiply that 5 into each of those terms. This question, I'm not going to give you on a test. I told you don't get a calculator for this one. I do not expect you to know off the top of your head what 5 times 15 is and what 5 times 18 is. I would give you smaller numbers than that. This is your workbook. Not that that's hard multiplication. I just feel like it takes you a little bit longer to do, and that's not necessarily worth your time. I'm not testing your ability to multiply numbers. I'm testing your ability to multiply polynomials, right? Priorities. So 5 times 2x is 10x squared. 5 times 15 is 75x, but that was a negative. And then 5 times 18 gives us plus 90. That is your final answer. Let's just do a quick review on this one of our terminology. So the 10 is our leading coefficient. Minus 75, make sure you're including that negative, would just be a coefficient. And then plus 90 is our constant. Just a review for you. Okay, a question like B, we have that pesky squared. So I would start off, and for saving space, I would write it on the same line. This question's really saying negative 8 times 7p plus 3 times 7p plus 3.
Like the same space, just be able to scribble out
Totally.
square and then just write.
Totally.
7p plus 3 down.
Totally. Whatever works for you. I agree. There's not a lot of time space here. Okay, so on this one, again, I'm going to rewrite that minus 8 out front. When we do our inside of our brackets, we have 49p squared plus 21p plus 21p plus 9. If you're getting to the point where you could skip that step and just combine your like terms right away, that's fine. I just would be really careful not to make a little mistake. 49p squared plus 42p plus 9 is our trinomial that we get. Now I'm going to multiply that negative 8 in. Again, I would never do these numbers to you. Not worth your time to actually do negative 8 times 49. We will get, though, negative 392p squared minus 336p minus 72 as our final answer. It's really important that you're only putting in like the just solo numbers here, the 5, the negative 8 once. Make sense? We're okay? So those two would have been like level 4s with nicer numbers. These next ones are like 5, 6 questions. Okay, write as neat as you can. There's not a ton of space. We're going to do both of them. So this first one, we have 2, we're multiplying separately, then we're going to combine like terms. What's really tricky about this particular question is there is like a hidden number 1. Sorry, let me get the marker. There's like a sneaky number 1 right here. You cannot forget to move in to distribute that negative. So I would write that right away on these types of questions.
So is it whenever there's like a negative sign, I guess, enclosed by brackets?
Yep.
Opposite brackets, it would always have a value to it.
Totally. So whenever, I'll write this to the side. So whenever you have like something minus like this, there's a hidden, I would think of it this way, a hidden negative 1 really right there. Okay, so this question, our first set of multiplication, so our first set of binomials, we get x squared. You may be getting to the point where you're seeing this quickly. I'm going to go slowly through it though. So I get x squared minus 5x plus 5x minus 25. Questions like this, I kind of like following through with one piece at a time. I find it's easier. So then my next line, I'm actually going to write that these two cancel out. So then I have the x squared minus 25. So I kind of do like one piece of the puzzle first. I find it's a little bit more helpful to write it out like that. So then I'm going to have my minus 1. I'm doing it in red to overemphasize it for you guys. My next piece of the puzzle, I'm going to get x squared plus 8x plus 2x plus 16. So then when I clean up that piece of it, I have x squared. I should do that in blue. Plus 10x plus 16. Again, I'm showing a lot of work here. If you're good, you can show less steps. Now you're distributing that minus sign or that -1 through. So in effect, it's going to change the signs of every piece of this. So I'm going to get negative x squared minus 10x minus 16. So I'm going -1 times x squared. -1 times 10x, -1 times 16.
And would it be okay for us to just automatically write as -1 at the beginning of the question?
Yes, totally. If you wanted to as well, initially you could have put it in right away and then rewritten this as like -x minus 2 times x plus 8. You could have done that initially and then multiplied the 2 and been good to go. There's a lot of ways to do multiplication, right? The order doesn't matter when you're multiplying, just that you're doing the multiplication correctly. I find doing it this way a little bit more confusing. Okay, so from here, we're going to combine and cancel like terms. I have an x squared and a negative x squared. Those two guys cancel right out. So I have no x squares. I only have one x, so that guy just is going to stay -10x. Then I have -25 and -16 gives me a -41. That's your final answer. I did this question showing like as much work as I possibly could. You want to show less work, that's fine. How did that one go? Does that make sense? Yeah, do you guys want to try the next one on your own or do you want to go through it together? Let's try it on our own. I think that's brave. Be brave. So remember on this one, this is what Tim was saying. If you wanted to, scratch out that 2 and write 6a minus 5 to save space, right? Because those mean the same things, but then like prevents you from having to write it all out a second time. Okay, try this one on your own. I'm going to highlight for you again. There is this -1 here. So you're going to have to distribute that negative through. Okay, so on this one, you should get -5a minus 61. Notice things cancel out and you end up with fairly nice numbers. That's generally a trend that we try and do for you when we develop the questions. So that's kind of a hint for you. If you're getting some really crazy things, potentially you made a mistake, right? We're trying to be a little bit nice when questions are developed. Raise your hand if you got that one right. Good. I might have cut you off. I apologize if I cut you off. Good. That would be a really good like level 5 question. Okay, how are you feeling about these? Good, medium, silent. Okay, let's look at 4. So on this one, it's slightly different. I want to show you going through it the other ways that I've mentioned, but I haven't actually shown you. So let's first, on this first piece, remember order of operations like bed mass is at play, but also you can also just work left to right. So in this first one, let's multiply in our 5x initially. Let's kind of deal with that first. So I'm going to get 15x cubed minus 35x squared plus 5x. So in this one, I just want to show you it the other way, just so you guys can see it done a different way. I'm going to multiply in this negative here. Notice on this one, it's 3x squared, but that squared is like within the bracket, so it's only attached to that x. So this piece, I'm going to rewrite just with a positive here because it's kind of neutral. It just separates it out for that visually for me. And then this is going to become a minus 4x minus 3x squared times 5x minus 8. That negative only goes into one piece. So it's like there was that minus 1 out front. So now I can do my FOIL here like we've done before. So I got my 15x cubed. I'm just rewriting this first piece. I don't really need that plus sign, but I just find it visually it kind of helps me out. So minus 4 times 5x gives me a negative 20x squared. Minus 4 times negative 8 gives me a plus 32x. Minus 3x squared times 5x gives me a minus 15x cubed. And then I get plus 24x squared. So there's lots of different numbers here at play. So let's start with our cubes and deal with that first. So I have 15x cubed and 15x cubed. So those two just cancel out. That's nice. So our squares, I have minus 35x squared, minus 20x squared, and plus 24x squared. Personally, when I do this, like just to do the math easy in my head, I think negative 20 and positive 24, that leaves me with plus 4. Right? Those numbers simpler. And then negative 35 plus 4 gives me a negative 31x squared. Then I have x's. So I have 5 x's here and 32 x's here. Both are positive. So I get plus 37x. How was that? So just a different way of doing it. I just don't prefer it. I just find it wonky in my head. That's just 100% personal preference. Okay, let's do, how much space do you guys have? I kind of moved over. You ran out? Okay, we can skip B. If you want to do it on your own just to check if you have the space, the answer is minus 36x minus 64. There's lots of questions though. Let's do 5. For every value of x, the polynomial can be written in this form. Determine the values of a and b. So we know we're going to have, this is a weird question, right? Like this is written very differently. This is kind of like, I don't even know how to start. So we're coming up with two numbers to put here that will give us that equation in the end. So really, let's put this in the form like I've been telling you. Let's rewrite it as x plus a times x plus a plus b. Because that's how they want us to be able to come up with something that's then going to be the same value if I was to multiply those two binomials out to give us that 20x and 50. Really, the 20x to me is the more important piece. The 50 will play with that more after. If I was to multiply this out, because that's something we can do, right? A question like this, you're like, I don't even know how to start. Well, I've been preaching to you whenever we have a squared, expand it. Okay, so you can do that step. Now you'd be like, now what do I do? Well, let's multiply it out and rewrite it. So let's do FOIL, right? Every time, every question you come across, try and do FOIL. So I'm going to get an x squared plus ax plus ax plus a squared, and then that b is still hanging out. So then let's simplify. I have two ax's. I know that this a squared plus b has to be equal to 50. Right? Because there's no x attached to it. So that's how I know that piece of it. I know the 2a has to be equal to 20. Well, that's our starting ground. So then I can say 2a equals 20. Well, for that to happen, A has to equal 10. Can I figure out B now? Oh, someone say yes, please. Come on, guys. Yes. I know then A squared plus B equals 50. A we decided was 10. 100 plus B is 50. This is going back to our basic algebra. Can B be negative? Yes. Is it a little bit surprising for it to be negative? Like, was your first thought for it to be a negative number? Probably not. But that's okay. Negatives can exist and negatives are fine. Questions like this are really good. This is like the best level 6 question, right? You really have to understand the principles. You have to be able to interpret. You're applying what you know. That's a really good level 6 question. Okay, so we have about half an hour left in class. So we're going to spend this time working on the questions from yesterday if you didn't finish them. And then these questions as well. For 2, it's like only C and E. I feel like that's misleading.